A big shout out goes to Maxxis Tires, Jensen USA, and Fox Shocks for supporting the Inside Line.
Welcome, mountain bikers. This is the Inside Line podcast. We're doing a ride along. I'm Sean Spomer, content director over at e-mtb, and we are joined by Charlie Sponsel. You may know him as Team Robot or the guy that just reviewed the Fox Podium on our website. We've got him here because Charlie was gracious enough to put out the call for your questions and answers for your questions following his Podium review. What we're going to do today is answer those questions and see if we can keep you informed and, I don't know, do some homework for you, because there was a lot that came out. It's easy to miss some things. Hopefully we can fill in the gaps. And yeah, plus Charlie's pretty funny and he's really good at tech nerd stuff. So I think it'll be a pretty fun time. We have timestamps to all the questions that you left and that we answered below. So if you don't want to hear us talk about things like Charlie's baggage issues with overweight fees on the way to Leo Gang, you can skip to any kind of question and answer you want. But I want to kick it off with that story about the overweight fees, because when you told me that this is Charlie on his way to Leo Gang going to the Fox camp, all I could see was you on the floor at LAX with stuff strewn everywhere, and I think everyone else should get that picture too.
Yeah, so thank you, Sean. Wonderful to be on. And for those who don't know me, 6'3", 190 pounds. I'm an Aquarius. And if I was a sandwich, I think I would be a California club, because obviously, we moved to California 2.5 years ago, but also, it's a twist on a classic, right? Like, everybody loves a club sandwich, but you throw some avocado on there and I think it really takes it up a notch. So I think I bring something, modern and something classic to the table. That's what I hope I bring.
Yeah, you do for sure. I think that's awesome.
Anyway.
So these overweight fees and you laying on the floor in tears at LAX. I don't know if you're in tears, but I'll just throw that in there.
Yeah, pretty nearly crying. So I think, like, true real adults just bring what they need to bring and then just eat the baggage fees as they're needed. And this was my first time traveling with a bike for work, where I would be submitting expenses, but it's like, it adds up so quickly. Like, just bringing 2 checked bags is $175 each way. So I had my rolling Evoc bike bag, and then I had a rolling bag for all my stuff. And so I was trying to fit everything I needed in there, but that was the whole bike with a fork. It was clothes for every imaginable type of weather, because it just snowed in Poland, and I'm like, okay, I need to bring cold weather and warm weather and all this stuff, and it just adds up so quickly. And bike bags are heavy, and then my bike isn't light. Like, I think my bike is 38 pounds on a normal day, and I'm used to flying Alaska because we have an Alaska credit card, which, if you're in the United States, totally recommend. Benefits are great. But Alaska allows you 53 pounds, right? And so I'm used to that, and I've flown with my bag before, and they're also pretty generous. So if it comes out at 54.5 or something, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. And so I'm used to being able to bring somewhere between 53 and 55 pounds per bag without any sweat. And I was flying American, and I couldn't figure out, because it was international, whether it was the international amount or the domestic amount, because internationally you're allowed to bring 25 kilos, which is 53 pounds, which is the same thing, right? Or if it's 50 pounds. So I was trying to go back and forth and basically couldn't get an answer. And I was using the hold my stuff on me on a scale method, right, to try and measure everything, which is wildly inaccurate. I'm like, okay, I think I'm in the ballpark. I can't because the number was changing, right, when I shifted or breathed or whatever. So I'm like, I think I'm good. And I showed up to LAX, and it was just way over. My bike bag was 58 pounds. And so I desperately just started pulling everything I could off. So I think I pulled the front brake, I pulled the crank. I was about to pull the saddle, but then I was like, I think I need that for structure for the bag. I pulled the stem and spacers, because I was like, that's 200 grams right there. But then that
disconnected them from the bike in the bag?
Yeah, I fully like pulled the stem and spacers off, so I just had a loose fork in the headset, which was also terrifying because then that dawned on me on the plane of like, oh God, I'm pretty sure my head tube is going to be ruined, right? Like I'm pretty sure the fork just knocking back and forth in a carbon head tube was just going to blow it apart. and like I fully have seen the baggage handlers just I've like my last flight I was sitting over where they were loading stuff and I watched a guy just chuck the whole bag onto the like he had a phone, so he was like scanning every bag, so he like lifted my bike and tried to scan it and then saw the tag wasn't on there and then just dropped it on the tarmac like straight onto the fork lowers. Like that was the side he was on, and then he picked up the other side and then it like tipped over and he's like, ah, whatever, and he put down his phone and like chucked it onto the thing, and I'm like, okay,
man.
so my bike's definitely going to be ruined when it gets there. So anyway, I'm pulling things off, and the scale that they give you for customers to weigh, like to pre-weigh, is like 2 pounds off from the scale that they use behind the counter. So every time I come up and I'm like, it's good, right? And they're like, no, it's not. And there was one point where it was like 50.5 pounds, and they're like, it's over. I'm like, really? You can't give me 0.5? You can't give me half a pound?
That's gnarly.
So finally, my bike bag is 50 pounds, but my like rolling luggage is literally like 50.0 pounds too. And I have this shock that I can't do anything with. And so it's the four-sprung Tellum shock, and it's really heavy, right? So I'm like, well, I guess, no offense, Steve, but it's really heavy. It's thick. And so I'm like, I guess I'll just put that in my bag because it's like a lot of dense weight and I can fit it in my backpack. And then I ship everything off and I kind of just go, okay, please let it arrive, right, in one piece. And I walk to TSA and then I realize, oh my God, this shock, there's no way I'm getting through security with this thing. It looks like a bomb. Like we were saying, like you could bludgeon someone over the head with it.
Yeah.
Like if I were to take that shock with the coil spring in my hand and beat you with it, you would have a really bad time,
Dude,
right?
for
Like
sure.
it's a deadly weapon. And so it dawns on me like, okay, and I got to the airport like 2.5 or 3 hours before my flight, but this whole catastrophe took so long that I'm literally like on pins and needles of will I make it through TSA in time to like get on the plane? Because it's like 45 minutes left and there's a line. And it dawns on me like, oh man, if they flag my backpack and they don't like the shock, I don't have time to go back out of security and like call a friend to pick it up or ship it or like I it was so clear. It was like, I will throw this shock in the garbage. Like that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to throw this 12 because I didn't have enough time to not make my flight either. Like if I didn't make that flight, then I didn't make the connection,
Yeah.
and the thing started the next day, right? So there was like no buffer time to play with.
Yeah.
And so it was just like the weirdest feeling ever of like, this is my life. I should have just paid the extra baggage fees, right? Like I should have just been like, yeah, well, it costs more. Because I think it was like $200 for overweight. Like they'll let it be too big because it's a bike, but if it's overweight, it's $200 one way. And I just should, because $200 is less than a $1,200 shock in the garbage. So, and then I thought about like trying to bargain and sell it to someone at TSA. Like if I could sell it for like $150, I could buy it back for like 200, and that only cost me 50. And like, and I'm like, no, that's never gonna work. Like I'm sure TSA has all sorts of policies against that. So I'm like, yeah, it goes in the garbage. That's what happens. And then I imagined, right, calling Steve and being like, hey, so really enjoying testing your shock. Could I get another one maybe? So I say all that to say, good luck flying with a bicycle. Good luck. It's the worst.
Well, you pulled it off, and I'm glad you did because it seems like it was worth it in the end. But oh man, 50 and a
Thank you.
half, and they wouldn't let you on. That's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
Yeah.
All
Good
right.
stuff. And then I went through that whole thing to get back to and had to like pull cush core and tires off because I had 2 forks, right?
Oh yeah, because
It
you
was
said
great.
that when we first talked about like, right? Didn't you pull tires off? You had sealant all over the place or something
Yeah, fully, totally.
in the airport.
It was great in the airport. Yeah, it was great. And it
Uh,
was the same thing where one person said no twice, and in both cases, I got a different person the third time, and the third person was like, "It's fine, it's okay. Like you've suffered enough." Yeah.
well, I appreciate the effort. It doesn't sound like it was an easy task, but it's true.
Saving vital money, Sean.
Dude,
Saving vital money.
Hey,
'Cause I
thanks.
care.
That's great. That's awesome. Appreciate
Yep.
it. It's a good story too. I think it's pretty hilarious. So, All right. Well, we'll get into some tech stuff. One thing that I edited out in your final review video, just to keep things tighter, was your description of the Zeb that you were on, that you were comparing to the Podium. And so I noticed there were a handful of comments like, "Oh, if you had your Zeb set up right, it wouldn't feel the way it does," or whatever. If like add a Nokin, add this and that. But you're not stock with your Zeb. So do you want to just run through what your personal Zeb is set up like now?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. So I think the Zeb and the 38 are both really, really good products as a general one size fits all product for every rider weight and size. Like that's really difficult in suspension to have one tune profile and airspring and just fork chassis that fits everyone. And so I think they're pretty good, but I'm bigger and taller. Um, so I think the 38 and the Zeb tend to be under damped in terms of how much damping each damper assembly provides.
Hmm.
So like I think a lot of the pro enduro racers end up running stiffer tunes on those, and I am on the MRP lift damper, which provides a lot more high speed compression, which has just felt great. So I'm going to be releasing a review of that soon, but the long and short of it is it's really nice because they provide 4 different damper tunes for different rider weights. I think it's 4, it might be 5. But anyway, it is tuned for my weight and size and riding style, and I can really feel that. And the first time I rode it, it just felt like the fork was so much higher in the travel and more stable, which is what I want. Like I said in the review, I just hate the feeling of like diving. It's really scary and not confidence inspiring. So the lift has been great. And then similarly, the one thing that I think the 38 has over the Zeb is that because I think they're very similar in terms of performance, but I think the 38 has a more linear airspring, in part because of the way that they've built the airspring. Like it is a tube inside a tube as opposed to the Zeb, which takes up the whole leg. And so the Zeb ends up having a lot, I think, this is a guess. It's very progressive, is what I feel as a rider. And I think the reason for that is because there's a lot of trapped air under the airspring. So it just ramps up a lot and it's really hard to get full travel on it, which can feel like you're running into a wall of progression, like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way into the travel. And so I'm running the Nokin, which is the MRP product that adds positive air volume. So that allows me to run a stiffer top end and still be able to get full travel, which makes it just feel more supple the whole way through the stroke. And then obviously that lift damper keeps me higher in the travel. So both of those things make a good fork even better, which is worth mentioning because when I say the Podium blew that out of the water, that's really saying something because I thought that was a phenomenal fork. And I really enjoyed riding it at Leogang. Like I really enjoyed riding that at Leogang and had a great time on it. And then when I did back to back at Snow Summit, it was just like, holy cow.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was super impressed with the Podium.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah.
let's get into the goods. Obviously, I don't remember if I did this at the start, but a huge thanks to everyone that participated with these questions, that added their comments, their theories on what, why, everything about the fork. But there are a ton of great things in there that never crossed my mind. And some of these will be brought up. And it's, I don't know, the power of the community is why I love Vital right now, is especially the tech people, the race fans, but all the questions, the comments, everything's valid. So many things are subjective, but it's all worth talking about. Everyone does it so civilly. So thank you to everyone that reached out with questions on the site. I think you had stuff on Instagram too. And so we'll get into it. We'll start with just a little more general kind of overview questions that should have easy answers that won't get too deep. But all right, there was a comment. I think this one was on YouTube, but it says, "Is this basically a prototype for sale?" And that was interesting to me. And I could see why, because they just kind of let it out of the bag at Sea Otter and it was all rad prototype. And now here we are just a couple months later. But do you have any
Mhm.
insight on if that's true or not?
Yeah, I think that's funny, right? Like just right off the top, it's like, haha, that's pretty funny because it's so expensive. And so it seems as if, right, they planned it in small batches and they planned it as a very specific use case for very hard charging riders, like they're pros. Like they took something for their race team and said, okay, well, I guess we can sell it. And then they're selling it at an exorbitant price, right? Like, haha, that's funny. I don't know. I think mountain biking is weird because I think most of the time, it's not like there's a prototype for sale. It's like there's a sale product that's being called a prototype, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you posted the giant Anthem recently from Eurobike that, right, is clearly a finished carbon mold.
Yeah.
And has this super baller paint job on it and everything. And you're like, that doesn't really look like a prototype, right? That really looks like a finished product that isn't available for sale yet. And I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that whenever we saw folks on the rad forks, like it was Nico and Asa at Sea Otter or Richie and a lot of the Yeti team enduro riders at the initial EVR races, I think that those were probably finished forks and they were just running them through the paces. So I imagine that all of the actual tuning happened before that and they were just proving their product.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it was a production fork being labeled as a prototype out in the public.
I think that makes sense, especially when you hear, was it Nico said that they didn't get on it until what, like January in Laguna for the first time?
Yeah.
So that was surprising to me. I'm like, okay, they're far enough along that, I mean, maybe it was prototype then, but still between then and Sea Otter, I imagine it was a really similar fork, but okay.
Totally.
Sweet. All right. Tell the truth now. Did the CSU Creak, which is hilarious and obviously an appropriate question when we're talking about a box fork.
Yeah, and any long travel single trend fork. No, it didn't. And that's one of those long-term durability questions that is unanswerable. Right. So I mean, if the CSU did creak right off the bat, that would be really bad. That would be like exceptionally bad if I had 2 rides on it and it was already creaking. But like realistically, if you're a customer and you buy a $2,000 fork and it creaks 2 years in, you would be pissed.
Yeah.
Right. Like you kind of expect a $2,000 fork to just work besides regular maintenance. So, and also like you can't just replace a CSU. I was thinking about this. You're replacing the steer tube crown and the entire upper assembly, right? Like those legs are pressed in from the factory. So if you did have CSU Creak, it's like a lot of money because those upper legs have to be machined, right? For bushing tolerances, and probably they come with bushings pressed in from the factory. So it's like, yeah, it would be totally devastating if it did. So I'll wait to see. Fun fact, I bought that fork, the Zeb, in 2020 and it only started having CSU Creak like 2 months ago, which is crazy. So from October 2020 until now is 4.5 years. So like lots of people have had creaky Zebs. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's like pretty sweet. And I think generally the bike industry is getting better with that and learning. And I also think that just accepting taller axle to crown heights as opposed to try, like I remember when the 2936 came out and the crown was like that tall. And I just remember thinking, this is the stupidest thing ever because they were trying to have a 29-inch fork without having such a higher handlebar. And it's like, cool, the handlebar is like 5 or 10 millimeters lower, but also the fork, like I just instantly assumed like this is going to be garbage in 6 months, right? Like it's just going to creak, and they've kind of accepted that. And the 38 and the Zeb and this thing just have taller crowns for the steer tube mounts. So we'll do it. Yeah.
All right. Why is it 29 only, and does it matter? Which
no, it doesn't matter. It's not. It's just 29 only in terms of labeling, right? Like I've seen tons of people run 26-inch forks on 26-inch wheels on 27 forks, or 29-inch wheels on 27.5 forks back before the 29s were available. And like I think the only thing that really matters is just the offset. So the offset is 44, which is really close to a 650 offset, which I think is 42. So like, yeah, if you care about 2 millimeters of offset, you're high. So
got bigger problems.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's totally fine. So if you had a, like, what's a cool 27.5 bike? Like the Yeti SB165, like if you had that
Yeah.
and you wanted to run or like the old Nomad that had dual 27.5s, like I think it'd be great.
Yep. Cool. All right. So the right side up is basically the 38 SL, and this is the burlier version? Question mark.
I guess, right? Uh, yeah, I think that's one way to look at it. Because it was weird, right? Like seeing this fork in the wild and going, how does this fit into the Fox product lineup? And like, like, are they planning on ditching the 38 and this replaces it? Or, because it sounded like it was really heavy, and it is by comparison. So you're like, are they expecting every 38 rider to ride a fork that's like more than a pound heavier? And it seems like they're just going to have both forks with a lot of overlap in their Venn diagram just in their lineup, which is weird, but also super cool because it allows riders to pick and choose. So I think, yeah, if you're super conscious about weight, the 38 SL, right? Yeah, I think so. I think everything about this fork was surprising to me when Fox released it as a production fork, but I think it's pretty cool.
Sweet. I also had this question and was curious to hear your thoughts, but thoughts on the potential stanchion damage since, they're low and exposed now. Like, do you think the guards are going to do a whole lot?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Because I've been thinking about this a lot.
Yep.
What do you imagine hurting the stanchions? Like, what actual object are you imagining hitting the stanchions?
I would say most of the time it would just be rocks when you drop the bike or lean it over, if something goes south. I don't see it happening naturally. And at the same time, I just think of, like enduro moto and what those riders go through. And I know it's a different product, but they drop their bike and go through the craziest things, and it doesn't seem like it's an issue for them. So I don't see it being a huge deal, but I'm just curious on what your thoughts were. And so is the person that asked.
Yeah. So, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think the scenarios that you described where you're worried about the lower stanchion hitting a rock are exactly the same scenarios where I'm worried about my normal stanchions on a right side up fork getting hurt. Like every time, I'll tell you, every single time I crash in a rock garden, I look at my stanchions. Like, especially if it's like front tire push and I slip down, I go, oh my goodness. And not just my stanchions, but I've seen holes punched in magnesium lowers because they're really thin. Like a magnesium lower is really, really thin, and you can punch a hole in it, and then your fork pukes out all of its bath oil, and lowers are really expensive. So yeah, I just don't think right side up forks are super robust in a crash scenario.
Okay.
And I think the good news with that is that I haven't had a fork ruined that way. Like I've crashed that way a bunch of times and gone, oh no, and I've looked down and it's been fine, because it tends to hit like your handlebars or your frame or your wheel or something instead of destroying your fork, or it'll like hit the lowers, but not, it'll like slide instead of just punching through. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway, is that the assumption is that they're somehow magically vulnerable and that a normal fork is invulnerable, but the truth is that they're both vulnerable. And then, like, realistically, if you actually look at where these stanchion guards are, like, if my bike is kipping over on the side, they're right where you would want them to be. I guess if the handlebar, like, if the handlebar is sticking out there and the handlebar bounces, then maybe this part is in the danger zone. So I'll give you that. But again, like, I think a normal fork is in the danger zone. What's interesting is I don't know if you saw Jeff Kendallweed's video. He destroyed his stanchions from driving somewhere. And yeah, he destroyed one of his stanchions. I think it was the the drive side, like not the brake side, and it's just annihilated right here because he was in a bike rack. And so I think it was a thing where like his bike was loaded this way and someone else's bike was loaded that way, and their pedal came down and he was driving and their pedal was just rubbing it raw. And so I think that's actually the biggest risk, is that if your bike rack or like your at-home bike storage or whatever is configured around a normal fork, and you haven't even thought about like vulnerable things or like stuffing bikes in the back of a car or whatever, it's just a new and different habit to learn, of like learning to think about the bottom of your fork as opposed to the top of it. So I think that's the greater risk. And like, I'll just say in general, taking a bike anywhere is the worst thing you can do to it. Whether it's loading it on like a ratty old chairlift at a like downhill race,
Yeah.
or like loading it in the back of someone's car, or stuffing it in a car, or like bringing it on a plane, right? Like, it's the best thing for your bike is to just leave it at home on the rack, right? And like, as soon as you take it out into the world, it's just
It's over.
totally
Well,
like
you
and
in the
somebody
video,
pointed out in the video that
yeah, you have a scratch. Yeah. Where do you know where that came from? On the
so
upper tube.
that's right here, and that's from my rack. So it was so funny, and it's like annihilated in the video. I don't know if you can see it here, but anyway, it's really clear in the video, and I have a similar corresponding scratch, not scratch, like groove worn out in this 38, sorry, this Zeb, like right where the seal presses in to the magnesium lower, and it's like paper thin there. Like, you can break that really easily when you're taking a seal out with a socket wrench or open-ended wrench. And so it's like paper thin magnesium casting, and my Thule rack just like rubs on that all the time on the highway. And also I have another scratch that you can maybe even see on this video, like halfway on the chainstay. It's rubbed raw from my Thule rack when I run 2 bikes in there. And so like one of the fork like holders or front tire holders is like rubbing on my chainstay. So it's just like, you can't win. You just can't win. And there's no point even trying to have a nice looking bike, because it's just like, it's going to be annihilated as soon as you take it anywhere.
Right.
Yeah. It's just like, it's just like, just not today, God. Just not today.
Yeah. That's crazy that Kendallweed had that happen. It's almost like that's probably the best case scenario. So many people can understand, like, hey, treat this fork differently.
Yeah, just be careful, man. Like, stuff is in different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not a riding scenario. So that's why I asked, like, what's the scenario you're imagining? Because the one that I imagined, I thought through and was like, oh, that's actually probably not any worse. But then the scenario I had not thought of, and obviously Jeff had not thought of, was a lot worse.
Dude, crazy. Huh? Yeah, I've got to watch that still. It's on the list for sure. All right, we'll get into some of the more tech questions. Let's start talking about weight travel. We'll just kind of group a handful together. What is the weight and how does it vary? Because there are a few different options there.
Yeah.
And then why do you think it's so heavy?
Yeah, so I've got, the weight is, I want to say 26.95 for what I've got. And there actually is a different version of the fork that weighs slightly more, and I want to say it's 27.60, so it's like 65 grams more, something like that. So 65 grams is like not even a quarter of a pound. It's like an eighth of a pound. So not a lot, but it's for different crown diameters, which you're like, well, what does that mean? Because I didn't know anything about this, and somebody from our forum explained it to me. So this is a 58 millimeter crown from one side to the other, and then they make a 68 millimeter crown, which is popular for e-bikes, but not only e-bikes, but e-bikes especially, because when you have the like pregnant looking down tube from a battery, the down tube is so big that they like to make the head tube even bigger to like have visual continuity. And then if you have a huge like XL beer can sized head tube, it looks weird to have a puny little crown underneath it. So they like make the crown big to match. And then also that 68 mil crown is popular or necessary for 1.8 inch like tapered steer tubes.
Yeah.
So not all e-bikes have those, but kind of all e-bikes now have the bigger head tube to match or be compatible. And so anyway, there's 2 different crown sizes. And I think if you're running an e-bike, you just probably don't even care about 75 grams of like crown weight. So I think that the customer who's really worried about weight is the one who's going to be on the 58 mil anyway. But yeah, it's a lot. And like, I have those numbers here. I want to say it's 2150 for the, oh, I don't know, it's somewhere. Yeah, there we go. Comparable Fox 38 factory is 2194 grams, and a Zeb Ultimate is 2341. So that means, yeah, that the 38 is a pound less. Yeah, it's more than a pound less. It's
Yeah.
like 501 grams less. And then the Zeb is actually considerably more. So it's like 350 grams more than a Zeb.
Good.
So yeah, it's like, that's a lot. And you can argue that it isn't. Like, I can make that argument that it's not a lot of weight, but it is on a percentage basis. That's like 20% more. Which if I weighed 20% more, it would be noticeable, right? Like, I would be 225 pounds. So yeah, in fact, more than that. Yeah, I'd be like 230 pounds. So I would notice being 20% heavier. So yeah, it's just like it's just a lot more material. And that was one of the reasons why they over and over again said they didn't go with a 180, for two reasons. One, because it would have reduced bushing overlap, which was one of their big design goals. So they wanted to have as much bushing overlap as humanly possible. And I got a great answer back from Fox about why exactly this layout creates more bushing overlap. That was really cool, and we could talk about it. But anyway, they wanted to maximize that as much as possible because that was one of the big performance attributes that they were chasing. And then in addition to that, it just would have pushed the weight a lot more, because to have less bushing overlap and keep the stiffness they wanted, they would have to make it stiffer by just adding material everywhere else. And then it just gets heavier and heavier. So yeah, they basically felt like 180 was reaching too much at this point. But something that Ariel Lindsley, who was on the product team, and I got to interview him for that other video, he said over and over again in the product presentation that they gave all of us journalists, and in my interview with him, like, yeah, we probably could have done 180. Like, looking back now, I think we realized that too late in the design process to realize, like, oh, we probably could have. But they already felt like this fork was so far out there that they didn't want to be any more out there. They wanted to be like in touch with the 38 in terms of weight, and they wanted to, yeah, they just thought that was too much too soon. So I have a sneaking suspicion that they'll make a 180 version in the next 2 years. And then the other question is like, well, if this adds so much performance for a customer for whom weight isn't a concern, and specifically downhill descending performance, like, the $1 million question is like, well, when are they going to make
the dual crown
downhill fork?
Yeah.
Right? Totally.
Yep.
Like, I told them, I'm like, I think you just gave me the best pitch ever for why you should make a dual crown, right? Like, you gave me the sales pitch of like, cool, it's cool that it's a single crown. Like, when are your downhill guys going to have their own version of this fork, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
but they said, like, I asked Ariel that, and he was like, yeah, we think this is like a 30% increase in performance with a normal single crown, and it's probably like a 10% increase for a dual crown. And again, I was like, yeah, well, that's a lot, right? Like,
yeah, when they're chasing
I think Jackson
hundreds.
won Leo Gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He won Leo Gang by 0.07. So it's like, yeah, I'll take 10%. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, on the, you talk about this a little bit in your review video, but your Zeb is 180. This is 170. You said you didn't seem to miss that travel. If this came in 180, would you rather run it that way?
Yeah, all day, for sure.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, because again, there's no downside. And then I could run it slightly softer, potentially with a spring, and then I could run slightly more damping. And so I would have usable travel available, but keep it like feeling stable. Yeah, I just think it's more of a good thing. So, I mean, I guess I can't answer that question without riding it.
Yeah.
But my assumption is that, yeah, that would be sweet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is, the answer to why it's so heavy, is it all the material kind of in the uppers and joining the crown together with the legs and stuff? Is that where the bulk of it is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And I think the real answer is everything. Like, I think people would be shocked how much. And also, by the way, Fox doesn't have a number for this yet, but they're working with their engineer team to get an answer back to me on what the unsprung weight of this fork is compared to a 38. So that'll be cool to be able to do apples to apples comparison. But I think you'll be surprised how much, right? Like, aluminum, a lot of aluminum. Like, this is like honed fancy aluminum, but this is like a big chunk of machined, forged and then machined aluminum, a steel axle, right?
Yeah.
Like all the, like, I think this isn't a lot lighter than a magnesium casting. Like if you ever held a magnesium casting in your hand, it's so freaking light. Like I just don't think this is, they're not saving tons of weight down here in unsprung weight.
Mhm.
And then aluminum, like these tubes are really big in diameter, but I also think that they're probably pretty big in thickness because they have to be able to resist impact and yeah. And then also be able to stand being pressed into this, which is a difficult thing to ask an aluminum tube. And the crown itself is very, very, very substantial. So I'm curious. It's so big that I wonder if there are hollow spots inside the crown,
Hmm.
but I don't know. But yeah, just everything on it is really big, and big equals weight. Um, and again, like people compare this to the Intend a lot
Yeah.
or the Push, right? They're like, oh, the Push is only a little bit heavier and it's got a coil spring in it, or the Intend is like 300 grams lighter. And I'm kind of like, yeah, well, I bet I know why this one weighs more, right? It's because they were chasing absolute peak stiffness,
Hmm.
right? And
Well,
so if
that's
you
one of the
shed
questions.
material,
Do you think a lighter fork could be as stiff as this?
I'm not an engineer. My assumption is no, not without, maybe if you use carbon tubes, you could save some weight for the upper tubes. And I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't, right? Because like a Dorado uses carbon outer tubes. Um, but yeah, man, I think a lot of very smart people worked on this. Like just off the top of my head, Fox has way more engineering resources than Intend or Push, right? So I think if lightweight was a goal, they could have saved weight, and they didn't because they were chasing stiffness.
Hmm.
So I just think like you have to compromise one way or the other. Um, yeah, maybe if everything was made out of titanium and carbon fiber, right? Or like you could replace internals with plastic, but nobody wants that. So, although probably that doesn't save weight either because plastic is like not light. So, yeah, I don't know, probably not. And for me as a customer, like I would way rather have front to back stiffness. Like it obviously has some torsional flex in it. But I would way rather have a little bit more weight and have that front to back stiffness that gives you the magic ride feel.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, probably not.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the axles. Is this why you made a 20 millimeter axle thread in the forum a couple weeks ago? Because you knew this was coming up?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I would have been pissed if I was a customer. And I kind of was, right? Like I was calling you up trying to figure out a front wheel situation. Um, and so I ended up bringing a front wheel and having to tear the tire off and do all that to get back from the Munich airport, right? So that was a pain in the butt. But yeah, we did figure out like I got to keep a race face wheel from the camp. So Fox provided me with a front wheel, which not every customer just magically can get a free front wheel. So that becomes a pain in the butt. But thanks to that thread, I found out that the E13 front wheel that I already have has changeable end caps. So that's pretty cool. And there are actually a lot of companies that have that.
Yeah, that thread
Not
was
all of them,
surprising
like
with how many were out there.
totally.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, it's really easy to change end caps. So if the hub maker has left you enough room inside those like front axle bearings to stuff a 20 mil axle through, like that's not a hard engineering problem to solve with just changing end caps. But if they haven't, if they've spec smaller bearings and there are reasons why they would want to, then you're screwed and you need a whole new front wheel. And like no one in the world should ever replace a hub and save a rim and like throw away, right? Like you can't relay spokes, so you're pretty much just getting a whole new front wheel.
Yeah.
Not a hub.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought this was a good one, but why not have swappable axle sizes like the EXT Via has, apparently? Huge miss there
Yeah.
is what the comment said.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of people who make aftermarket. This is something else I found out. There's a lot of people who make aftermarket axle reducers for like the Fox 40 or the RockShox Boxer. So if you wanted to have a long travel dual crown on your enduro bike and you didn't want to get a new front wheel, you could do that. I think somebody makes them for the Dorado. Like there's a lot of them available. So you can do that. And there's also adapters so you can run like a 20 mil front hub in a 15 mil fork. Like it's just a sleeve that goes in there to like bump up. Anyway, so there's a lot of different things you can do, but uh, yeah, I think the short answer to your question is because then you would lose stiffness. Um, like they went out of their way to test a bunch of different axles to dial in front end stiffness, and they tried a lot of axles that were less stiff than this, and they also tried axles that were more stiff than this and landed on this one. And if you start running reducers and a smaller axle, it's going to throw everything off. And specifically, this axle is steel, right? Which just has different, not just different stiffness characteristics, but one of the things Ariel said that I thought was really interesting is that they tried aluminum and steel axles with exactly the same stiffness rating on a like test jig. Like they ran them in like FEA and on an actual test jig, and they had the same stiffness measurement, but they rode different. They were like consistently noticed by blind test riders of like, oh, that one felt stiffer or weird or whatever. Like I really like this one, which makes sense because if you think about frame material, people can absolutely tell differences in like, especially in applications where you don't have enormous tires. Like road bikers are so religious about frame material, right? About like, I ride titanium or I ride steel or I ride carbon or aluminum or whatever, because they can feel those different characteristics. And like, for instance, no one in the world runs an aluminum coil spring, right? Where like if you're expecting a structure to bend and release a lot, using steel has some pretty clear advantages because it like bends and absorbs energy differently than aluminum does. So yeah, so I think you'd be losing out on that. And I think that's obvious. Like I'm certain, I'm totally certain that Fox did not want to release a trail enduro fork with a 20 mil axle, right? Like that, what a nightmare. And that was mentioned in every single interview of like, this sucks. Every review said, this sucks. So Fox wasn't like, oh, you know, it'd be so cool as if we made everyone get a new front wheel. They obviously included that because they felt like it was necessary for the performance characteristics they wanted, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, they weren't in a hurry to inconvenience customers, I don't think.
Yeah. Okay, this one's a little bit long, but it's pretty interesting. Someone asked, I wonder how much of the ride feel is due to that larger axle. I got a 20 mil Fox 36 fork in 2017, and it made a huge difference to how my bike rode. It mirrored a lot about what you were talking about with the front tire just going where you told it versus deflecting. Are there any right side up forks out there right now offering 20 mil axles? It'd be rad to get the same fork in both configurations and test that. Obviously, it doesn't sound like this was a huge part of their product development.
Yeah. So that question was from my friend Matt Saladay up in Ferndale, Washington. So, hey, Matt.
Hope you're good.
He actually has one of the better usernames, which is that's Stud Beef Pile, right? Yeah. Anyway, and he's a big guy. I want to say he's like 220, 230 pounds. So he's got a couple pounds on me. And I think stuff like this becomes super noticeable when you start adding mass, right? So the two types of riders who are really hard on stuff are very, very, very fast riders and very heavy riders, because they're just, both groups are putting way more energy into stuff. And then when you start to be a heavy, fast rider like Matt, then you can like really, really put a lot of energy into stuff. So yeah, I have so many, I share his questions and I have so many questions about it because I've read over and over again in our forums, like I think it was Ryan Burney or somebody, there was a inverted fork thread like 2 years ago for like downhill inverted forks, where they went on and on and on about this question about axle stiffness. And lots of people, like I think Dave Camp, who works at RockShox, was talking about how there just really isn't a dramatic difference between a 15 or 20 mil axle in terms of thickness, in terms of stiffness, in torsion. And the more important things are like, are you clamping the axle versus is it free floating in the dropouts? like if you can imagine a handlebar that isn't clamped in the stem, right, is very different than a handlebar that's like truly clamped all the way around. Like that's going to resist torsion and flex a lot more. Um, so that's on the one hand is a lot of very smart people saying it doesn't make a difference. Uh, and what I heard from Fox is that yes, it's a 20 mil versus a 15, and we think that makes it stiffer. But one of the other things they said very clearly is we're not just talking about axle diameter, but also thickness and material, right? So it is a very thick axle and it is a very steel axle. Like there's just a lot more material there. I mean, I guess it's not super thick for steel, but the corresponding aluminum stiffness one was like way thicker than a normal aluminum front axle. And yeah, so I say all of it to say, I'm not surprised to hear that Matt could tell a difference in his front axle back when Fox gave you both options on the same fork. But it does go against like what the math nerds say, and what other people have said. And in addition to that, there are other aspects to this,
Okay.
like material thickness and material.
Yeah.
So all of that doesn't answer your question at all, but it's more questions.
Yeah.
I have more questions.
But they're good ones. So
Yeah.
I was surprised when cutting up your video and you mentioned the fact that if you put a shock pump on, you could barf out oil onto your rotor, and you brought that up. And, one person just said, which never occurred to me. I'm like, oh yeah. The question was, why not put the air side on the opposite side of the rotor to avoid oil spray? Did they talk about that at all? Do you have any insight?
Yeah, so they actually did. It's funny. Because one of my questions for anyone in a development process is like, what battles did you win and what battles did you lose? Right? Like that's always a fun question of like, which things were you able to get into the final product and which ones were you not? And so Ariel Lindsley, said that he actually had suggested that because, right, he thought it was silly to have so much fork oil
Interesting.
next to the brake.
Yeah.
And, if he's able to make that mistake, then like an average user is 1,000% able to make that mistake, right?
For sure.
And he said like, we should try this. And the message he got back is, yeah, but our customers are used to having rebound compression on one side. And by the way, I'm sorry, Ariel, if I'm getting you in trouble with the bosses right now, but if this is all like inner like palace intrigue that shouldn't get leaked out. But anyway, like, no, our customers are used to having their compression knobs on this side and their air spring on that side. And so Ariel went back and he went, fine, whatever. And he did it to his own fork. So he pulled the assembly from one side and swapped it.
No
And
way.
I'm not clear. I would love to ask Ariel. I'm not clear if that meant, like, I don't know if I, as a user, can just unbolt stuff and rebolt it onto the other side, or whether, like, literally he had the different legs pressed in from the factory. Like, I don't know which one of those. But I thought that was really cool. Like, oh, I would love to do that. I would love to have my air spring assembly on my drive side instead of my brake side.
Yeah.
But then here's what's so funny is he said, yeah, but we actually settled on the air spring profile really early. And then I've been testing damper tunes a ton. So then I was just in my damper side over and over again with oil everywhere. And I wish I'd kept it on the original side because
No way.
I was just having, yeah, totally. It was super. He's like, for an average customer, it would be great. But for me, it actually was the worst thing ever because I was pulling dampers in and out like on every single ride. So that's pretty funny.
That's super interesting. Yeah. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, it's super funny.
I understand from the top down being like, hey, customers are used to X, Y, and Z, but are they? Are, are they going to flip over the bike and be completely confused as to where the rebound knob went or whatever? Like, doesn't seem like a huge swap, or like identity crisis for the brand.
I mean, that's what I thought. But you know what I think is way more of a risk? So I don't know if you saw this, but there on the airspring side, there is an airspring top cap. And then when you open it up, it's like there's a saying, I'm going to read it. It's really small, but somewhere in the massive B-roll, I think there's a clip or picture of it or something. But yeah, it says, for service only, not an adjuster. but then, and warning, but there's like tool interfaces right there. And I'm just imagining someone being like, oh, that's how to pump it up, and not reading anything and just like blowing their fork apart and like losing their eyeballs or something. So anyway, yeah. So I say that to say, no, I don't think it would have been a big deal. And if they decide, like, if there's a way for me to swap them, I might do that.
Cool.
But one note, we were talking about that as he was, like, we had my bike upside down on a ride, and we were pulling volume reducers. And I will just say that it's pretty annoying with a wheel on there if you don't have a ratcheting cassette lock ring tool, because you get like that much rotation on the tool every single, because he had like an Abbey style one, and it just took forever, right? It just took forever to like take that cap off and then put it back on. So if you can have a ratcheting one, that's pretty great, or otherwise plan to take your front wheel off, because it just takes an eternity doing like half spins.
Just because the wheel's in the way.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The way I have stuff ordered, the next question is, how is it different from an intend or a push or any existing inverted fork? Have we sort of covered that? I mean, you've never ridden either, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that both of those companies, I think, are more concerned about weight than Fox. And especially because Darren is putting a coil spring in there, he's like, already, when you're making a coil spring fork, you're like, oh God, it's going to be so heavy that I think it's... So based on what I have heard from riders trying to like read between the lines and who do I trust and who do I not, I think the Podium is going to be stiffer than both of those, especially in torsion, but I don't know. And we're supposed to be testing a push this summer, so fingers crossed that thing shows up.
Come on, Darren.
We have, I know, right? Bring it on. And so many people have asked for that comparison.
Yeah.
We do not have any plans to buy an Intend anytime soon, because they're quite expensive. So if anybody wants to send us an Intend to test, we got you. Yeah, we will test whatever.
Charlie's in the greater Southern California area, so you guys can meet up.
Yeah. Totally.
All right, let's we'll get into performance recommendations, things like that. So question, kind of double up a couple, but are the benefits worth the price tag? And or here's my $2,000 question. Knowing what you know now, having ridden the fork, if Fox took the fork back, would you go out and buy one?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, I would not. But I'm also like, I'm a terrible person to ask about that, because like I run old tires until they're like, and I try and buy used stuff online. Like I might shop around for a cheaper used one.
Yeah.
Right. In a year or two, like looking for takeoffs. But no, like that Zeb that I was telling you about, that's 4.5 years old, I bought used on Pink Bike. Right. So no, I'm just not that customer. Like I'm just not that. Like I'm this rider and I'm not this customer. So no, I'm never going to spend $2,000 on a fork, but I am stoked to have one. Like I'm pretty pumped to have one.
Okay, let's say you're the customer that tomorrow, you're buying a new fork and you're looking at a regular 38 versus a Podium. Do you think the price difference is worth the Podium?
That's just a question of what money's worth to you. Because like, again, I mean, it's not apples to apples, because I can go buy lightly used or takeoff Performance Elite 38, right, with black stanchions that's fundamentally the same. Like, you know what I mean? It's just not the same thing at all.
Dude, for sure.
And I can get that fork for like $600. And I can't get this fork used, or I can't get the Performance Elite version of this, whatever.
Yep.
Like, you have to shell out $2,000. So it's an obscene amount of money. And I'll also just tell you, every year I have this question in my brain of like, is this the year that I quit mountain biking forever? just because of how expensive it is. Like, it's such a ridiculously expensive hobby.
Uh-huh.
And cards on the table, that's part of the reason why I'm writing and working for Vital is I'm like,
Same
man, if
here,
I'm gonna
yeah.
keep this hobby up, yeah, totally. Like, I'm not like, there are so many mountain bike customers for whom their mountain bike purchases are like an infinitesimally small percentage of their disposable income.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you think about just getting any fancy car or a car, right? Like just getting a car, right? And we have listeners who have multiple cars, right? Like what a crazy thought. I'm in a 1-car household. I'm married and we split a car and we like just got $1,000 e-bike as transportation. We're like, wow, we're really living it up. Like we have a motorized bicycle. This is amazing. So there's just so many different worlds of income here. And so it's just not comparable at all. Like it's just like, and then just think globally, right? Of like how much most people in the world live on. And like, I have a $115 tire on that bike. And you're like, what is this, man? Like what sort of like District 6, what's the movie with Jennifer Lawrence? It's spacing on me.
Oh, yeah. Not Squid Games.
Yeah.
What is it?
Where the kids kill each other.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know the movie where the kids kill each other?
Some kind of game, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, is it? What is it? Like Mockingjay is one of them.
Hunger Games.
I can't. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, Hunger Games. Like we live in the Hunger Games because we're debating like, well, should I get this $2,000 fork or this $3,000 fork or this $1,000 fork? And meanwhile, like kids don't have teeth, you know? And it's like, yeah, we live in a crazy world. So what is money worth? I have no clue how to answer that question for you.
Right.
But I will just tell you that it performs a lot better than a conventional right side up fork. And that's pretty much, that's the only question that's worth answering because everyone is going to decide what money's worth for them. But does it work better? Absolutely. In every conceivable metric other than like weight and how hard it is to put a front tire on and off. Right? Like other than that, it's better in every conceivable way.
Okay.
So
hey,
you make your mind up.
I like it. I'm still on a dual 27.5 bike and I'm like you. If the stuff didn't happen, if random bikes didn't show up to be able to ride for a couple months at a time, like my bike would be 15 years old, I'm sure. So
totally.
All right. Help me decide. I ride in P&W, a bit of enduro racing, local trails such as Tiger, Raging. Should I put this on a Mega or a Rocky Mountain Instinct, which I run with a longer coil shock to give me 150 mils of rear travel? I just feel that given the weight, this is a better fit for the Mega. On the other hand, my instinct is billed as a TrailDuro bike, and I enjoy the lighter weight, which gives me room to put an extra bit of grams on the bike.
And are we talking about a Mega Tower or a Mega?
That's a good question. I don't know. Put this on.
What's the new proof one? Giga, Mega what? What's the
I mean,
nuke proof Mega?
What's
the rest of that word? I can't believe I'm spacing.
The gigawatt?
Yeah, but it's not called the Meg. Oh, it is the megawatt. Okay. No, megawatt is the.
No, he's talking
the power one, right?
Oh, is he talking about a nuke-proof Mega, which is all it was called, versus? Oh, I thought you were thinking of Santa Cruz Mega Tower. So okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's talking. Like, is he talking about a nuke-proof Mega 290 or like 297, or is he talking about Mega Tower?
Might be. He thinks it's a better fit.
I guess
for
they're
the
kind
Mega.
of the same bike.
Yeah. I think does Mega get 160 out back? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, would you put this? Well, yeah, 160 bike.
Okay, so I just want to say it's crazy that this customer has this reader has two bikes that are like almost exactly the same bike, right? Like, I think the Instinct has 140 millimeters of travel, and both Megas have 160 or 165. So, like that would be my first relationship advice is I would consider diversifying your portfolio more, like maybe getting into like the 120, 130 mil travel. Like if I could have two bikes, it would be this and like something a lot smaller, but taking that off the table, I think it makes way more sense to have this fork on a longer travel bike. Like you could put it on a shorter travel bike, but I think I was just having this debate with someone a good friend of mine, Alex McGinnis. Many of you know him as Crunkshocks. And he left me like 2 angry voicemails about people putting Mavens on XC bikes and like trying to make down Duro bikes. Long, rambling, like screed type voicemails. And because his whole thing is like, yeah, but you can put bigger brakes on it and bigger tires, but like that's not what it's designed. Like everything is designed to work as a system, right? And when you start building up one part of the system, you start like very rapidly reaching the limits of the rest of the system. And I read this very interesting blurb. This is a very long answer to your question,
I
but
love it.
it was a book about the development of the F-14 Tomcat, which you might remember from such greats as Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. And that is the heaviest fighter ever made. Like fully loaded down, fueled up, it's 70,000 pounds. And it's huge. Like if you've ever seen one in life, they're really, really, really big. Because it was like a dual function fighter that was supposed to be able to intercept MiGs that were like flying across. It was supposed to be able to go very, very, very fast to intercept very fast, like intercontinental fighter planes, which is why the wings sweep back so it can go supersonic. And then the wings come out so it can land on an aircraft carrier. So it's like a dogfighting plane, but also like, it's like an F-15 to cross long distances, but then it's like an F-18 in dogfighting. But you kind of can't have both. And so the designers were like constantly battling both of these design parameters. And it just kept getting heavier. Like over and over again, it just kept getting heavier. And there was this quote that said, weight chases weight. And I thought that was so smart because when you need it to go faster, you need to put in bigger engines, and bigger engines weigh more. And bigger engines suck down more fuel, and fuel weighs a lot, so then you have a lot more weight in fuel. Well now, let's say you have heavier engines and heavier fuel, all of a sudden you have to reinforce the airframe because the airframe is carrying more weight. So then the airframe and like the landing gear, right? Because landing gear on an aircraft carrier just get obliterated because it's like dropping out of a 4-story building. So then the landing gear have to get really, really strong, and then the tires have to get heavier, and everything gets heavier. And then you realize that your fast plane is now less fast because it's heavier, right? And it's worse in dogfighting, so you have to do all these other things to like mitigate that. So you just keep adding weight, and I'll just tell you that's been my experience with this bike is it just keeps getting heavier because I keep reaching the limit of some part of it. And I hate that. Like I hate getting flat tires. I hate breaking stuff. It's just so, I've broken so many bike parts in my life that I'm like I'm trying to be retired from just breaking bike parts. So I run downhill tires, and I run 32 spoke wheels, and I run Cushcore front and rear. And I like haven't had a flat tire in a while, but that means it's really hard to stop the bike. So then I run 220 rotors front and rear. I actually am experimenting with a smaller front rotor, so that's kind of fun, doing the Troy Brosnan. But like I'm running Mavens, and like everything just gets heavier and heavier. And like, let's say you go to a coil shock. Well now, oh, my fork feels like doo-doo. So now I want to go with like a Podium or a coil fork so it matches or whatever. And it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So that's a very long answer to tell this reader to keep your big bike big and keep your little bike little, and ride them differently, right? Like I can come around any corner and just see whatever I see and be like, well, I'm gonna ride over that. Like my bike's set up that I can ride over this pile of rocks. Whereas if I were on a short travel bike with thinner tires, I would pick and choose my way down a little bit more. And I would also be able to like roll faster and pump stuff more and have more fun in that sort of scenario. So I think I would maximize the strengths of each of those bikes.
I appreciate that answer. I like it. Let's say you're going to build a Burly Freeride bike. You could have the Podium or a 190 mil dual crown. They weigh about the same and have roughly the same axle to crown. Which do you pick?
I choose the dual crown every day. If the bike is compatible, right? Like we're assuming that this bike, both because you get more travel, right? You can have 180 or 190, and you can actually have more travel at the same axle to crown because dual crowns are shorter because a number of reasons. But anyway, I would go with the dual crown. I would take more travel, and it would be cheaper. Like that's the crazy thing is that a Fox 40 I think is cheaper than this thing, right? Or a Boxer is cheaper than this. Like I want to say a new Boxer is like 1900 or 1800, and a 40 is about the same. So it's like, yeah, I would take that. So especially if it's specifically for free ride, like it's kind of nice to have a single crown fork for riding weird enduro tracks where you have to like do like there were some turns on the EDR track that we rode in Leogang that were stupid how tight they were. And it can be cool to have a single crown for that. But if you're just like hucking it, dual crown for sure.
Cool. For life.
For life.
All right. This is the last one in the list. Where did it go? Oh, okay. The question is, or it's more of a statement, but I don't understand where the sentiment of this fork being better for e-bikes comes in.
Yeah. I think that's just because it's heavier. Like I think, well, no, it's two things. It's because it's heavier and it's expensive. So if you're already buying like a $10,000 bike, then the marginal difference in cost between this thing and a 36 or 38, I think the cost for that customer is just less. And also, generally speaking, I think e-bikes, especially at the higher end, go towards that like ridiculous disposable income customer that we're talking about, where a lot of them are in their later peak income years. Like you just don't see a lot of ratty 20-year-olds rolling around on S-Works turbo levos, right? I'm sure they're out there, but like that's not the typical S-Works turbo levo customer I see. So money would be one, and then weight. Like I tend to think that, well, first off, you care less about weight on an e-bike. But then also, I tend to think that an e-bike abuses a fork more because it's static weight. Like, and this is my own theory, but I think that 20 extra pounds of bike weight is very different on the equipment than 20 extra pounds of rider weight, because the rider weight is dynamic and can like get light over obstacles and things.
Yeah.
And unconsciously you do that. Even if you're not trying to get light, like you just can and you do because it feels good to not like get rattled around so bad. But a bike can't get light. And a great example of that is like whenever I'm commuting on my bike with a pannier, like if I want to have weight on my backpack, if I want to have weight in a pannier on my commuter bike instead of on my backpack, the bike rides so much better with the weight on my back because I can pump and turn and like hop over curbs and go down curbs and stuff. And it just rides like such a sack of bricks when I have a pannier on there, and it's just like getting bounced all over the place. And so I tend to think that the additional front to back stiffness would be really beneficial on a very heavy e-bike that's like more likely to flex out the fork. So
yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. Yeah. Awesome. Are there any things that you feel like didn't get communicated in the review or on the forum or with any of these questions that, you want to talk about? And then, sort of along those lines, there are people in the forum saying like, hey, the best way to test this is to buy a stock fork that, they don't know it's going to Vital because they fluff it up and prep it for you guys. So it's perfect. Do you have any things to say about that?
Yeah. So that's such a big question, and we could honestly it would be so interesting to get a panel of mountain bike journalists and ask that question of like, how does journalistic ethics work in this environment? And what are your different approaches to navigating? Because you're right, like I was invited to a fabulous travel experience, right? Like incredible hotel, the food was great, everyone was so friendly, they like patted me on the back and told me how funny I was, all that stuff. And obviously they want me to say nice things about the product, right? And I get to keep this $2,000 fork, and there's all of that. Fox is an advertiser for Vital, but as you pointed out, so is RockShox. So, like, I guess you could say that just means we're in with big suspension and we like have it out against Intend or Push or whatever. But I have not received that encouragement from Spomer yet. Like Spomer, you haven't told me like, make sure to really make Fox sound good. But yeah, I think it's more the obvious direct corruption that's the risk, which is that all feel happy and warm and fuzzy when I go have a great time getting to get paid to fly across the world to go ride my bike in a beautiful place, right? Like, of course that factors into it, and that's a challenge that I am mentally trying to overcome constantly.
Hmm.
And it's part of the reason why I was really excited to read everyone else's impressions, because a lot of people got like pre-release podiums, and I was curious, like, am I crazy? Am I like really like I kind of gushed about it in that video from Snow Summit, and then I kind of felt like an idiot as I was driving home going, yeah, but was it really as good as I thought it was? Like, I don't know. But I mean, when I got off the bike, it was just night and day. It was worlds better.
Hmm.
So yeah, you as the listener just have to decide for yourself if you trust me. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And, you know, something that we talked about, Spomer, is that you can't necessarily trust people who buy it for themselves either. Like, that should result in less corruption. But then there are all sorts of additional biases built into that. You can imagine a certain sort of person who would spend $2,000 on a fork and would go through like mental gymnastics to justify that purchase. Like, it has to be the best thing ever because I mean, look at how much I just spent of my own money on this.
Yeah.
And then you can also imagine a different sort of mental spiral where it has to be better than perfect and the best thing ever. Or like Dale Stone with the Maven review. Like, he got so much traffic to his channel by blasting the Mavens and how exhausting they were for his fingers on long descents.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. Like, I haven't had that experience, but maybe his fingers like really truly were so sore. Some people have said that that was like a pre-production batch or like a blem or something that was out of spec or who knows what. I don't know. But there is an incentive in and of itself for someone who's running their own small channel to be controversial and inflammatory because it generates traffic.
Yeah.
And Spomer, I haven't talked to you about this yet, but I think we should consider getting like an ESPN like constant argument segment going or like the news, you know, where they're just like, I think it's terrible. I'm going to disagree with anything you say. I think it's wonderful. And we just like argue the whole time.
Yeah.
Because that's such a proven trap for ratings, right? Like, people will just get sucked into that. So we should just get like more inflammatory, unhappy people on Vital. And then
No
we can
way.
attract more unhappy viewers. It'll be great.
No thanks. No thanks. Yeah, it's a tough one, and I understand why people might be skeptical too. But, you know, it's at the end of the day, if Vital and its testers are reviewing things that are complete garbage but saying they're awesome, our credibility is going to be shot within a month. You know, no one's going to trust us anymore. And so kind of feel like that's just what we've built over the years, that people trust what we do, and I hope it continues. And also, we have the place for people to disagree with us, and we have a community and tons of educated people to give their 2 cents and their input and keep that going. And I'm stoked on that. I'm proud that we have that, and I'm proud of the community that's built, and that we're not just saying, here's what Charlie thought, and that's it. There's no chance to discuss or comment or do anything about it. So, hopefully everyone feels the same way.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the whole thing runs on trust, and I am trying to be open and transparent and trustworthy in the way that I'm communicating this stuff, but every person has to decide for themselves whether they think I am, right? Like, and I can't, right? Like, I'll do my best, and I'm listening to feedback, but at the end of the day, if you don't trust me, then you should probably look for reviews somewhere else, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Or I mean, maybe other testers at Vital, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you did ask an interesting question, was there anything that didn't get covered? And I think there's 2 things that I had to cut from the article just due to space, because I write too much. And Jason and Spomer are always just like, dude, you got to cut it down. So I had a 3,000 word article limit on this one, and I almost hit it. I got to 3,100, so I'm like almost there. If you give a mouse a cookie, right? And anyway, so here's some things that got cut for space. I'll try and make it quick. One is that this fork just reminded me of my first time riding a good fork, which was I had previously had a Dorado. I had a 2006 Dorado, which was really cool, and it was the first like full suspension bike I'd ever had. It was on a mountain cycle Shockwave 9.5, which is a super weird bike. And then I had the Dorado, and I had a Fifth Element on the back too. So the Fifth Element doesn't work. It's like really sticky and weird. And then the Dorado was like crazy sticky and had the slowest rebound ever. So the bike like didn't really work. And everyone that got on it was like, this is the biggest piece of garbage ever. But I was stoked because I was 16. I was 17 and it was my first full suspension. I'm like, this thing is amazing. Like, I can run over anything. And the Dorado was 180 mil travel, so it was really short, and that bike already had a steep head angle. So it went from a 67 head angle to a 68 head angle with the Dorado on it, which is crazy. But I didn't care, right? I was like, this is amazing. That was fork number 1. And then fork number 2, I upgraded to like a Fox DHX 5.0 in the back, which was way more open and worked. And then a 888 that had like a blown compression cartridge. So it just was so much more open. And I remember going, this is way better. Like the front and rear end work, like they cycle and have a reasonable rebound speed. So I was stoked on that. But basically it was the choice between having a stable bike that like packed down a lot or having an unstable bike that like had fast rebound speed. And I was like, I think I prefer the fast one. And then I got my first nice downhill bike, which was in 2008. I got, like me and all the 3 original riders for Team Robot when we were a team, got a Giant Glory with a Fox 40 on it. And it was just worlds better. Like specifically the fork, like, yeah, the rear end was better, but the fork had this incredible ability to absorb bumps and stay high in the travel. You know, like it just felt like the handlebars were a foot higher, and I just couldn't believe how much better it felt. I'm like, this is what people have been riding this whole time. This is amazing, because it would track and carry speed well and all that, but it was so confidence inspiring not having my hands like just diving all the time. And I loved that bike and that fork. It was just like the best thing ever. And that's what getting on this fork felt like. Like it was that much better than what I was used to, because it didn't feel like it had that compromise. And then I wanted to share a very specific use case of when it felt good and why I think that is, which was on big, long berms. And I have historically just forever been kind of wigged out in big, long berms, because when they start getting into high G forces, it feels like my bike is kind of like seesawing a little bit. Like if I put my weight forward at all, the fork will like dive and compress, and that's really scary, because then you're like staring at your front wheel as you're going 1 billion miles an hour through a turn. Or if I go back, it feels like I'm gonna fall off the back of the bike, right? So there's like this weird, like uncomfortable teeter-totter feeling. And so I'm just terrified of big berms a little bit. And I watch other people rip through them, and I'm like, I suck. I just suck at bike riding. They're just better at riding that. And here's my theory. So the Podium didn't do that at all. And that was kind of the setting where I imagined that torsional stiffness would be a problem. Like being like loaded up in a turn would be where the front wheel would want to flex and it would be bad. But it just felt so good. And I was able to just look through turns, and oh yeah, it was so much more confidence inspiring. And I think that's weirdly related to bushings. Not because my normal fork would have bushing binding in a turn, but specifically because it wouldn't. So I think a Zeb or a 38 experiences bushing bind a lot of the time when you're hitting something, like basically anytime you're hitting a braking bump or an impact from a rock or dropping into a hole or whatever, you're just having this horrible force from the front, kind of like someone hitting your front tire with a hammer or like a sledgehammer as hard as they could, right? So the fork's wanting to bend like that. So a conventional fork is flexing and having bushing bind over and over and over again constantly in a run when you jam on the brakes as you're hitting through bumps. So essentially you have to tune around that. Like you can't run as much support as you otherwise might like to, because you have this additional unexpected form of damping from like this crazy friction in the middle of the fork stroke. So you have to run it maybe more open or like less airspring or whatever than you would want, so that it's still able to absorb those bumps as the chassis is binding. Well, if you take that fork that has the damper and spring configured around the expectation of binding, and then you put it in a big G-out berm, I don't think you're getting those binding forces, because I think, unlike the forces hitting like this, I think in a berm, you're mostly hitting like directly axially, right? Like in line with the bushings. Like the compression in a turn is more so coming straight up the fork. And it's also not a sudden impulse force. It's like more of a gradual build on. Ditto for jump faces. And so I think I was identifying all the places where my setup compromises were like being exposed. Jump faces and big long berms. And so the fork would dive because it didn't have the binding that I was essentially relying on as damping. And so with this fork, I'm able to set up the damping to work over rough bumps. And then that damping is still just there and available in spades for berms. So it's like I'm just not having a trade-off. And that's my theory to explain what I'm feeling. But that was the place where it was most noticeable, which is not where I expected it. So that's my theory. Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I've got mega FOMO from your descriptions about the fork, like just to try it. Again, I'm not a customer, but it'd be super, super interesting to try it out. So
totally.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, we have the forum topic on our website about the podium, and we'll keep this open-ended. Like Charlie's always in there responding and replying. So yeah, again, thanks everyone for your questions. And Charlie, thanks for all the hard work and taking your bike apart to get to the airport so it could be within the weight. But yeah, pretty stoked how it turned out. And yeah, I don't know, curious to hear more. And we'll hope that Fox doesn't ask for it back so you can ride it long term. Maybe report, see if anything creaks or gets sticky or anything like that. But
totally. Thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Peace.
A big shout out goes to Maxxis Tires, Jensen USA, and Fox Shocks for supporting the Inside Line. Welcome, mountain bikers.